Okay, so welcome everyone to the session, the conversation with Yochai Benkler. Yochai Benkler is a Harvard professor specialized in, let's say, the how internet is affecting economy and many other things. Well, it's a very short way to do it. Originally, this conversation was foreseen with Maya Fuster of the Wak University, but she can't make it. So I'm very happy that I can substitute her for me. It's a real honor to have this opportunity to interview you. We had just a chat before how to focus it, and we are inside of a big smart city expo, and we're like a kind of, if I can say it, we're the hackers inside, and the environment is very different. And you have some, well, we want to talk about how economy can be organized differently, like in more open models using free software, working on citizens' initiatives to collaborate. But it seems that we're like the different, what is the word in the expression is, we are the black ducks or something inside of this environment of smart cities. How do you see it? What does everyone else?
So this, so this is very interesting. There are these two things that are going on here around us that are very clear. One is very much about bringing the market into every corner of life and monetizing everything and making sure that you can make as many commodified exchanges as possible. And the other is about control. It's remarkable how much we see around here that is about control, about using the pervasive surveillance to control, whether it's to control in order to extract profits or whether it's in order to control a population. And I think one of the critical things about genuinely distributed, citizen-produced, open source, open data structures is the ability to resist this kind of control and this kind of surveillance and to provide platforms that aren't quite as optimized, either for state control or for market control.
So this is the more distributed model, to say it somehow, not to have like local small communities that somehow have certain autonomy to organize. And this is because you were invited yesterday for a summit. There was a declaration about cities, about how we face the challenges and the opportunities of the platform economy. And there is one way is we have to, yeah, what's your taking into account what you just said, what's your view on the outcome of this conference with almost 50 cities? And what is the challenge of these cities to collaborate and to go in one, either in another direction?
So the Sharing Cities Summit for me was very much about a large number of cities that are still a minority in the world, recognizing the importance of sharing and social collaboration, not just as dealing with Airbnb and Uber and how to regulate them, although there are still cities even within the alliance for whom that's the primary thing, but understanding it as an opportunity to create a genuine alternative model of production that governs more of our life. If you think of something like free software or like Wikipedia, 20 years ago, you come to a room full of economists and you say most of the infrastructure of the internet is going to be produced by a model where no one exclusively owns the software. No one exclusively owns the standards. You would have been laughed out of the room. If 20 years ago or 18 years ago you would have said Wikipedia is going to become the leading knowledge utility of the world, with no one being paid to write for it, no one being paid to edit for it, and the materials completely available for anyone to share, you would have been laughed out of the room. And these enormously important knowledge utilities have created a potential or have created an image of the possibilities of an economy that is built on social exchange, on sharing, genuine sharing, not Uber transactions sharing, but actual social sharing as an alternative. Now, we live at a moment when the neoliberal moment has essentially crashed and burned on the shoals of the Great Recession, and we're in this moment of great perturbation between the end of this period of 35 years where neoliberalism was dominant and unchallenged and what comes after. And the thing that's emerging in country after country is some kind of a nationalist populism that feeds people's identity and feels people economic anxiety through the idea that there's a better us and a worse them, there's a leader to follow, and things will be okay. And the great hope that I see in cities is to actually give people an opportunity to live in communities of practice, to manage their neighborhoods together, to construct, whether it's urban agriculture, whether it's fixing a park, whether it's managing a riding pool or a carpool together, as distinct ways of producing critical goods in the urban setting based on a model of production that treats each other as people, neighbors, and peers, rather than just as customers and sellers or as governments providing services to clients.
And specifically in Barcelona, there is lots of things going on, and that's what we want to show with this booth here. Many of these small projects, there is in the public even there is people from an Open Food Network. Yesterday we had the people of Moodle, of Mobilitat, which is an electric car sharing platform, and many other things. What do you see the potential just in Barcelona or in the greater area to let these models grow? And could they also be the seeds for other cities to copy the same? Because it is already happening, but it's not really scaling up. So you said 20 years ago no one would have imagined. Will in 20 years ago no one imagined that these guys will dominate agricultural food or will organize mobility in a much more sustainable way? Is that a hope we can have?
So I think one of the things, again, that I find so attractive about Barcelona's efforts is that we got to a certain scale with a set of projects, particularly open source software and Wikipedia, but then we encountered a blowback from private companies that took the basic architectures and subverted them, from states that came in and began to pollute the environment through information campaigns. And we came to understand, and by say we, I mean, I think the research community looking at these questions, we came to understand the value of having organized public organization, like the city, in collaboration with the commons in order to provide basic facilities, in order to provide training, in order to provide a network node that allows people to connect. So as I look at something like, say, Mobilitat or Somenergia, to me, the first step is for a city as you are now in Barcelona to set up and describe what's going on and make these projects visible to each other so they can produce an ecosystem. But the next step is to actually start to integrate it into city services. So in Barcelona, you don't have control over the school education system, so you can't bring Moodle in as a learning platform. But there are other cities that actually have control over their school system. And the next logical step is to start to bring an open source platform like Moodle to become the learning management system of the public schools. If you have Somenergia and you're trying to actually say, how do we expand this to a citywide scale? The idea of the city providing a center and a hub that allows projects to know about each other, that provides spaces and basic necessities is really critical. And the other thing is, when you look at Decidim and you look at the efforts to actually introduce a platform to allow citizens to participate in ongoing governance questions based on a more participatory platform, that again becomes a central part of embracing the open model as part of a better system for democratic accountability. So the city provides a model for, and in this is really, this Barcelona to me is unique, of thinking of itself as playing a major role in a public commons partnership instead of the much wider public-private partnership that ends up being having governments being pulled very heavily by the private sector and often losing their anchor in their public mission.
Okay, there is many people following the streaming, and they are not as lucky as we are to have like this commons public alliance, which is somehow facilitating the work on the ground. What can they do? What can they hope to improve this kind of citizens project and these more collaborative models of understanding the economy? What can other countries do?
So I think one of the things that I found very attractive about the model of the Sharing Cities Alliance and now the Sharing Cities Declaration of Principles is that you actually see cities from a broad range of countries coming together, agreeing on a set of principles, and beginning to share experiences with what it is that they're doing. So if Bologna describes its declaration of the rights of riders as a way of essentially organizing gig workers around a set of principles, that then becomes something that can be copied elsewhere. If Barcelona can teach its practices to other cities. So if you're talking about people elsewhere, the first thing to come and do at this point is to look at what came out of the Sharing Cities Summit, look at these Declaration of Principles. If you're in a city that's one of the signatories, go and say, what are you doing about this? Why aren't you implementing that, or could you implement the other? But if you're in a city that isn't there, try to educate your representatives. Here's what this is doing. A lot of cities are dealing with the same problems. They're dealing with the concerns, some of them at the very basic regulatory level, of companies coming and claiming that they're sharing economy, like Uber and Airbnb, but in fact are just creating very commodified relations. Showing them, here's a set of cities that have come together and begun to coordinate on a set of strategies. Showing them the models of what you're doing here, that becomes an important source of learning for other communities.
And then there is one critical thing, I think. There is a sense of urgency. So you say educate your governors. It is, well, that's very polite, but there is this climate collapse going on, and there is many things. There is what you said, the risk of surveillance, the risk of well, totalitarian regimes that are establishing that probably are not really willing to be educated by their citizens. So how do we face this urgency?
So there's the classic statement that there's the question of the urgent and the important, and how you manage both the urgent and the important. And I have no doubt that in any given community there are urgent political battles that you need to go out and raise the flag as an activist. But you can't build long-term projects purely continuously as a matter of urgency. So you need to pick what it is that is in your community, what is it that in your set of capabilities that you could find a way to build collaboratively as a working model that actually has an impact on your urban environment, and pursue that in the long term and start by building it yourself. And then deal with the urgent battles, but not to let the urgent crowd out the long-term important, if that means you're giving up on building a system that actually is sustainable, scalable, and could actually begin to deliver a meaningful portion of the practices. Whatever they are, they might be sustainability in the face of the climate crisis, they might be economic security in the face of democratic crisis, but whatever it is, not to confound the urgent for the important and long-term, genuinely transformational of what's pushing these dynamics.
Thank you so much. I think it's a nice conclusion you made. So we'll focus on the long term and don't get desperate about some things that's on the short term happening, right?
Great to talk to you.
Thanks.